Translate this and I'll give your mom my job. Those were the billionaire's exact words, sharp, cold, and dripping with arrogance. The room fell completely silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner and the click of a pen someone nervously dropped. Every pair of eyes turned toward the young woman standing at the far end of the conference table, Aaliyah Carter, a 20-year-old intern whose heart now pounded so loud she swore the whole room could hear it. Across from her sat Mr. Jonathan Hargrove, the CEO of one of Tokyo's most powerful tech corporations, a man feared by his employees and worshipped by investors. He leaned back in his leather chair, one leg crossed over the other, a smug grin spreading across his face. He was known for his charm in front of cameras and cruelty behind closed doors. He enjoyed breaking people, especially those who looked too different or unqualified to be in his pristine world. And today his target was Aaliyah. She had only been at the company for 2 weeks, an ambitious intern from Atlanta, chosen through an international diversity program meant to bridge cultures. But from day one, whispers followed her wherever she went. She's only here because of that program. She can't even speak Japanese. She's way out of her depth. Those comments burned in her ears every single day. Still she smiled, worked twice as hard, and kept her head high, just like her mother taught her to. But now, standing in front of the CEO and the entire board, she felt cornered. Mr. Hargrove picked up a sheet of paper covered in neat Japanese handwriting, meeting notes prepared by one of the senior staff. He smirked and flicked it across the glass table until it landed right in front of her. "If you're as smart as you claim, Miss Carter," he said in a slow, mocking tone, "then translate this, right here, right now." A nervous chuckle rippled through the room. Then with a cruel twist of his lips, he added, "Do that and maybe your mom can take my job." The laughter that followed was instant, cruel and echoing. Several employees turned away, pretending to check their phones just to hide their smiles. Others simply stared at her, waiting to see her crumble. Cameras clicked as one of the reporters, invited to cover the meeting, started recording the moment, probably expecting a humiliating clip to go viral. Aaliyah froze. Her throat tightened. Her palms grew sweaty against the notepad she held. She could feel dozens of eyes stabbing into her, eyes that didn't believe in her, eyes that wanted her to fail. In that moment, her mind flashed back to home, to her mother, Denise Carter, a housekeeper who used to come home every night exhausted but smiling. Denise always told her, "Baby, when the world tries to break you, stand taller. Make them choke on their own doubt." Aaliyah took a shaky breath. She felt the sting of humiliation rising, but beneath it, something stronger was stirring. She slowly bent down, picked up the document, and studied the page. The handwriting was elegant, the sentences written in neat kanji and hiragana. Mr. Hargrove laughed again, his voice dripping with condescension. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you suddenly forgot your Japanese lessons, Miss Carter." More laughter. The air was thick with mockery, but then something changed in her eyes. A quiet fire, a calm determination that made even the laughter begin to fade. Behind those trembling hands was a girl with a secret. A girl who had spent her childhood sitting beside an elderly Japanese woman while her mother worked. A girl who had learned the language not from a textbook but from love. Mr. Hargrove didn't know it yet, but in the next few moments, the girl he mocked would silence an entire room. With words he could never understand. Back home in Atlanta, Aaliyah's mother, Denise Carter, had worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy Japanese family for nearly 15 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. Denise would leave home before sunrise, riding 2 buses across town to reach a quiet suburban neighborhood, filled with cherry blossom trees and carefully trimmed hedges. The family she worked for, the Takahashis, treated her with kindness and respect, something rare in her line of work. And every now and then, when Denise couldn't find a babysitter, she would bring little Aaliyah along. Those days were Aaliyah's favorite. While her mom cleaned the kitchen or folded laundry, Aaliyah would sit on the tatami floor beside grandmother Takahashi, an elderly woman with silver hair, soft wrinkles, and eyes that seemed to sparkle whenever she smiled. At first, they couldn't communicate. The old woman didn't speak much English, and Aaliyah barely understood a word of Japanese. But somehow they connected, through gestures, laughter, and kindness. Every time Aaliyah visited, the grandmother would hand her a small notebook, and point to words written in careful hiragana. "Repeat after me," she'd say softly. "Arigato." "Arigato," Aliyah repeated. "Good," the grandmother smiled. "It means thank you." Day by day, that simple game grew into something beautiful. The old woman taught her greetings, expressions, even songs. She explained how the Japanese language carried emotions within the tone, how every bow, every phrase came from respect. Over the years, that friendship became their secret bond. Aliyah didn't just learn the words. She learned the heart behind them. She learned that silence could be polite. That humility was strength. That kindness could cross oceans. So years later, when she stood in that cold Tokyo boardroom with dozens of eyes laughing at her, that memory came rushing back like sunlight breaking through clouds. Mr. Hargrove's cruel laughter echoed in her ears. But in her heart, she heard Grandmother Takahashi's gentle voice instead. "Breathe, Aliyah. Speak calmly. Always from the heart." Aliyah took one slow, deep breath. The laughter faded into the background. She looked down at the handwritten notes Mr. Hargrove had thrown at her, her fingers trembling, then steadying. Without saying another word, she began to read aloud. Her voice, soft at first, flowed smoothly through the air. "Kono ki wa kaisha no mirai o kaeru kanousei ga arimasu." The syllables rolled off her tongue perfectly. Graceful, confident, natural. The words meant, this plan could change the future of the company. For a long moment, the entire room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. The same executives who'd been laughing seconds ago were now staring wide-eyed at her. The Japanese board members leaned forward in their chairs, their expressions shifting from surprise to awe. One of them whispered something to another in Japanese, his voice filled with disbelief. "Binu no hatsuon wa kanbi da." Her pronunciation is perfect. Another nodded slowly. "Ando wa doko de Nihongo o manandan da?" Where did she learn Japanese? Aliyah didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply continued reading the next line, confidently, fluently, as though she had been born and raised in Japan. Every phrase she spoke carried the tone of respect, the rhythm of discipline, the very essence of what she'd been taught as a child. The billionaire who'd once looked untouchable was now shrinking in his seat, his smug grin fading into confusion. He had tried to humiliate her in front of everyone, but instead, he'd just revealed the truth. That the young black girl he mocked was not just smart. She was extraordinary. As she finished reading, she placed the paper gently on the table and looked around the room. Not a single person dared to laugh. Not one. Even the sound of the city traffic outside felt distant, as if the whole world had paused to witness that moment, the moment when humility defeated arrogance. And for the first time since stepping into that company, Aliyah finally stood tall, not as the nervous intern from Atlanta, but as a woman who belonged exactly where she was. For a long moment, no one in the room moved. The silence felt thick, almost heavy enough to crush the air itself. Mr. Jonathan Hargrove, the billionaire CEO who had built an empire with nothing but confidence and power, now sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, his hand still hovering over the coffee cup he'd been holding. He blinked once, then twice, and wait, he stammered, his voice cracking for the first time anyone could remember. You speak Japanese?" Aliyah looked directly at him, no longer the nervous intern who had walked into the meeting minutes ago. Her voice was calm, clear, and grounded. "Yes, sir," she said. "Fluently. And not just speak. I understand the culture, the etiquette, and the people behind it." Her tone wasn't arrogant. It was steady, the kind of confidence that didn't need to shout. The Japanese investors seated along the long conference table began whispering among themselves. Their faces, which had been politely expressionless a few minutes earlier, now showed visible admiration. Finally, one of them, Mr. Tanaka, a senior executive known for his stoicism, leaned forward with a warm smile and said in Japanese, "Hino no hatsun wa kanpeki desu. Anata no shain yori mo yoi." Her pronunciation is perfect, better than your own staff. A few others chuckled softly, nodding in agreement. Mr. Hargrove's smirk vanished. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and rigid. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, one of the investors turned directly to Aliyah. "Miss Carter," said Mr. Tanaka in English now, "how long have you studied Japanese?" Aliyah smiled modestly. "Since I was a child, sir." My mother worked for a Japanese family back in Atlanta. I grew up learning both the language and the culture from them. Remarkable, another investor murmured. No wonder you speak with such grace. You honor the language. The shift in the room was unmistakable. A few minutes earlier, every eye had been on Mr. Hargrove, the powerful, confident CEO. Now, the spotlight had moved entirely to the young black intern he had tried to humiliate. The investors began asking Aaliyah detailed questions about their project proposal, market trends, localization strategies, cultural expectations, and to everyone's amazement, she answered each question fluently, alternating effortlessly between English and Japanese. Every time she spoke, the investors nodded approvingly, impressed not only by her language skills but also by her understanding of cross-cultural business dynamics. Meanwhile, Mr. Hargrove sat in silence, tapping his pen nervously against the table. He was supposed to be leading this meeting, impressing the investors, closing the deal. But now they barely looked at him. The room's energy had flipped completely. The arrogance that once filled the air was replaced by quiet admiration. Admiration for the very person he'd mocked. One of the investors even leaned back and said with a small smile, "Mr. Hargrove, it seems you have quite a talented employee here. You should be proud." Mr. Hargrove forced a weak laugh, but his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't proud. He was humiliated. He glanced toward the cameras that had been recording the entire meeting. They were meant to capture his leadership, his brilliance. Instead, they were capturing his downfall. The clip that was supposed to go viral for entertainment now recorded something else entirely: poetic justice. Across the table, Aaliyah kept her composure. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply focused on the discussion, calm, professional, and unshaken, and that quiet grace made her victory even louder. By the time the meeting ended, one thing was clear: the power dynamics had shifted completely. The billionaire who had mocked a young black intern was now reduced to a silent observer, while she stood tall as the voice everyone respected. As the investors began packing up their notes, Mr. Tanaka turned to Aaliyah once more and said in Japanese, "Anata no yona hito ga mirai o kaeru no desu." People like you are the ones who change the future. And for the first time all morning, Aaliyah smiled, a small, humble smile that said everything words could not. By the time the meeting ended, the balance of power in that glass-walled boardroom had completely changed. Aaliyah, the once quiet intern everyone underestimated, had become the star of the show. The Japanese investors, who had arrived with skeptical expressions earlier that morning, now surrounded her, shaking her hand and thanking her for her insight. They praised her not only for her flawless translation, but for how she handled herself. Calm, respectful, and sharp, Miss Carter, one of them said warmly. You understand both our culture and our business. That is a rare gift. We hope to continue working with you. She bowed politely, just as she'd been taught, and replied softly in Japanese, "Arigatou gozaimasu. Manabu kikai o itadakete kouyou desu." Thank you. I'm honored for the opportunity to learn. Every executive in the room could feel it. The tone had shifted. Aaliyah wasn't just the intern anymore. She was the bridge that connected two worlds. Meanwhile, at the far end of the table, Mr. Jonathan Hargrove sat slumped in his chair, red-faced and silent. His pen tapped nervously against his notepad as he watched his investors, walk right past him to shake Aaliyah's hand. When the last of them finally left, the grand conference room felt eerily quiet. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner remained. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then, without looking up, Mr. Hargrove muttered, his voice low and tight, "I didn't know you spoke Japanese." Aaliyah turned toward him, her face calm and composed. "You didn't ask, sir," she replied gently. "You assumed." Those three words hung in the air like a mirror, reflecting everything wrong with his arrogance. He nodded slightly, unable to meet her gaze. For the first time, he seemed human, not the untouchable billionaire, not the loud, commanding CEO, just a man realizing how small pride can make you look. The next morning, Aaliyah walked into the office expecting things to go back to normal. But they didn't. Her email inbox was overflowing with congratulations. The Japanese board had sent a formal request that she be included in all upcoming project negotiations as the official cultural liaison between the Japanese and American divisions. Her manager nearly burst into tears of pride. "You have no idea what you've done, Aaliyah," she said. "That deal was on the verge of collapse until you saved it." Later that week, the company newsletter released a story that spread like wildfire through the corporate world. The headline read, "Intern Bridges Cultures, Wins Global Deal." Screenshots of the headline circulated on LinkedIn and Twitter, inspiring thousands. Messages poured in from people who saw themselves in Aaliyah, young dreamers who'd been overlooked, underestimated, and mocked for where they came from. Then came the biggest moment of all. A few days later, Mr. Hargrove stood beside Aaliyah on a brightly lit stage during a press conference. Cameras flashed, journalists leaned forward, and the company logo glowed behind them. He held a glass trophy that read, "Award for Cross-Cultural Excellence." As he handed it to her, he forced a stiff smile for the cameras. "This young lady," he said, his voice rehearsed and heavy, "reminds us that true innovation comes from understanding people, not just technology." The room applauded. Aaliyah took the award gracefully and stepped up to the microphone. For a moment she scanned the audience and among a sea of faces, flashing lights and camera lenses. Then, in her calm, steady voice, she said words that made every viewer, and in that room and online, they'd stop scrolling. "My mother always told me," she began, "never respond to disrespect with anger. Let your work do the talking." The applause that followed wasn't polite, and it was thunderous. Some people even stood up. Because in that single sentence, she didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for everyone who had ever been laughed at, doubted, or told they didn't belong. And standing there under those bright lights, Aaliyah didn't just look like an intern anymore. She looked like a symbol. Proof that humility, skill, and grace could silence arrogance louder than any argument ever could. A few weeks later, Aaliyah's plane touched down in Atlanta. As she stepped out into the familiar humid air, the city felt smaller than she remembered, but warmer, kinder. She clutched her suitcase, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and disbelief. For the first time in months, she wasn't walking into a skyscraper full of judgmental eyes. She was walking home. When she opened the front door, the soft aroma of herbal tea and freshly baked cornbread filled the air. The walls of their small apartment still had the same peeling wallpaper, the same framed family photo from years ago, and there, standing in the kitchen wearing her old house robe, was her mother, Denise Carter. "Baby," Denise exclaimed, her face lighting up with pure joy. She rushed over, wrapping her daughter in the tightest hug as if she was afraid to let go. Aaliyah smiled, her voice trembling with emotion. "I missed you, Mom." Denise pulled back, looking her up and down, from the neat navy blue business suit to the confident glow in her eyes. "Lord, look at you," she whispered. "You look like one of them CEOs now." Aaliyah laughed softly, then reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. She placed it on the kitchen table. "What's this?" Denise asked, frowning curiously. "Open it," Aaliyah said. Her mother tore the top gently. Inside was a formal contract, the company's letterhead stamped in gold. "They offered me a full-time position," Aaliyah said, her voice breaking slightly, "and a scholarship to continue my Japanese studies." For a moment, Denise didn't speak. Her hands trembled as she held the letter, reading it again and again as tears began to roll down her cheeks. She remembered all the nights she spent scrubbing floors, humming softly while her little girl sat nearby repeating Japanese words from a wrinkled notebook. She remembered how Aaliyah would proudly translate small phrases to the Takahashi grandmother, how the old woman would clap her hands and smile in delight. All those moments that once felt small now felt divine. Denise finally whispered, "You did it, baby. You really did it." Aaliyah hugged her again, tears slipping down both their faces. "No, Mom," she said softly. "We did it." That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Aaliyah sat by her window scrolling through her phone. Notifications flooded her screen, messages, articles, and videos from around the world. Someone had uploaded the clip of her translation moment from the meeting, the one where she stunned the billionaire by speaking fluent Japanese. It had gone viral. Over 10 million views in just a few days. The caption read, "Billionaire mocked her. Then she spoke his language." Comment sections were filled with praise. "This gave me chills. She's the definition of grace under pressure. Proof that you can't judge a book by its cover." But Aaliyah didn't smile at the fame. She didn't care about being viral. What mattered was what the moment meant. She scrolled past the comments, past the headlines, until she stopped on one photo. Her mother and her, taken years ago outside the Takahashi family's home. A little girl holding a notebook, a mother holding a cleaning rag, both smiling as if the world couldn't touch them. Aaliyah whispered softly. "We didn't need anyone's approval, Mom. We just needed to believe." A week later, a journalist invited her for an interview. Sitting in front of the cameras this time, calm, confident, and radiant, Aaliyah was asked, "What message would you give to people who've ever been underestimated?" She smiled thoughtfully before replying, "People will judge you by your skin, your accent, or where you come from. But when you respond with skill, grace, and truth, you make them remember who you really are." The clip spread like wildfire again. Schools, workplaces, and community pages shared her words as a reminder that dignity speaks louder than pride, and humility can disarm even the cruelest heart. That night, as Aaliyah and her mother sat on the porch watching the stars, Denise squeezed her daughter's hand and said, "You didn't just change your life, baby. You changed how people see us," and for the first time Aaliyah truly believed it. Because what started as an insult in a Tokyo boardroom had turned into a lesson the whole world would never forget.